Welcome to another deep dive. Today we are going to be challenging pretty much everything that we know about biology
Pretty much, yeah.
with this concept of biological transmutation. So have you ever wondered if what we know about chemistry and biology is completely wrong?
It's a really big question and a very intriguing one.
Yeah, we're going to be delving into the work of researchers like C. Louis Kervran and George Ohsawa.
Saw, yeah.
And they propose that elements can transform into other elements within living organisms.
Which is pretty wild if you think about it, because that kind of goes against everything we've learned in physics and chemistry.
Right. In physics, we learned that to transmute elements, you need immense amounts of energy.
Like in a nuclear reactor.
Yeah, but what if living organisms have found a different way to do it?
Using biological energy.
That's right.
Some kind of biological energy.
It's almost like living beings are performing alchemy,
Yeah.
transforming one element into another.
Yeah, you can think of it that way.
So let's start with nitrogen. In a book by George Ohsawa, we find some perplexing observations about nitrogen imbalances in both animals and plants.
Yeah, Kervran, who Ohsawa drew upon, noticed that nitrogen wasn't always behaving as expected.
Okay.
Sometimes it would disappear from what was ingested, and other times it was being produced by the body, even during fasting.
It's like nitrogen is playing hide and seek in living organisms.
Yeah, it really is.
So, for example, there was an experiment where they showed a dog excreting more nitrogen than it consumed.
And in another study, oil workers in the Sahara Desert, despite, the harsh conditions, were found to have a positive nitrogen balance, meaning they were somehow gaining nitrogen.
So where could this extra nitrogen be coming from?
Right. And to add to the mystery, there's the sealed tube rat experiment.
Oh, yeah?
So a rat was sealed in a tube for 2 months with only chlorella and oxygen.
Wow.
Not only did it survive, but when the tube was opened, the nitrogen in the air had decreased significantly while the oxygen had increased and the rat had gained weight.
That's crazy.
The only explanation seemed to be that the nitrogen was being transformed into carbon and oxygen
To produce carbohydrate.
to produce carbohydrates.
So instead of just passively absorbing nitrogen, it appears organisms can actively manipulate nitrogen at the atomic level, transforming it into other elements and back again.
Yeah, so it goes against our current understanding of biochemistry, right?
Yeah.
This led Kervran to propose that nitrogen can transform into carbon and oxygen and vice versa within living organisms.
Okay, so maybe this idea can help us understand another phenomenon known as endogenic oxycarbonism.
Oxycarbonism, yeah.
So imagine like a red-hot cast iron stove
Okay,
and the potential for carbon monoxide poisoning.
right.
Well, what if the explanation for this is more complex than we thought?
Yeah, so welders who breathe air that's been in contact with an incandescent metal surface
Yeah.
often experience carbon monoxide poisoning.
Mm.
But there's no detectable carbon monoxide in the inhaled air.
So the carbon monoxide wasn't breathed in.
Right.
That means it was produced inside their bodies.
Somehow, yeah,
But how is that possible?
that's the big mystery.
All right.
Kervran theorized that the nitrogen in the air, when activated by the heat from the metal, transforms into carbon, which then combines with oxygen to form carbon monoxide within the body.
This is all pretty mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Is there any other evidence to support these claims?
Well, there's the case of potassium and its ability to appear where it shouldn't.
Okay.
So Kervran observed that the ratio of potassium to sodium varies in different biological environments.
Okay.
So, for instance, seawater and blood plasma have a low potassium to sodium ratio, but inside cells, potassium dominates.
Interesting.
He also noted a link between potassium and heat resistance.
Okay.
A higher potassium to sodium ratio seems to correlate with a greater ability to withstand heat.
So that makes you wonder if the environment itself plays a role in how potassium is utilized or even created.
Exactly. And Kervran offers some really compelling examples.
Okay.
Think of saltpeter forming on walls where potassium seemingly appears out of nowhere. Or the formation of dolomite, which is a magnesium-rich rock within calcium-rich environments.
Uh-huh.
There's also the fascinating case of chickens and their ability to produce eggshells.
I remember reading about chickens and mica.
That's right.
What was that all about?
So chickens need calcium to create the calcium carbonate needed for their eggshells. But when deprived of mica, which is a potassium-rich mineral, they can't produce hard shells.
Ah.
So Kervran suggested that they might be transforming potassium into calcium to make those eggshells.
So he's proposing that elements can transform not only within the body, but also in the external environment.
It's a pretty wild idea.
That's fascinating.
He also observed that plants grown in sodium-rich soil produced potassium-rich ash.
Wow. So it's almost as if sodium was turning into potassium.
That's right.
So these are some bold claims. Is there any other evidence to support this idea of sodium transforming into potassium?
Well, he also studied workers exposed to extreme heat, like the oil workers in the Sahara Desert. And he found that they maintain their thermal equilibrium by excreting more potassium and craving salty foods.
Okay.
So this suggested an increased need for sodium, which he believed was being transmuted into potassium to help them withstand the heat.
That's truly remarkable. If these observations are accurate, they suggest that living organisms possess a hidden ability to manipulate elements at the atomic level.
In ways we haven't even begun to understand. It's
Mhm.
pretty amazing.
Indeed. And Kervan's observations weren't limited to nitrogen and potassium. He also found intriguing links between magnesium, phosphorus, and calcium. I'm curious to hear more about that. What did he discover about these elements?
He found that magnesium levels in rats stayed consistent even when they weren't getting any magnesium in their diet.
That's really strange.
It was as if their bodies were creating magnesium internally.
So where could that magnesium be coming from? Did you have any theories about that?
Well, he proposed a few possible reactions, including the transformation of calcium into magnesium or sodium and hydrogen, combining to form magnesium. He also suggested that magnesium could transform into calcium and phosphorus. It's like a delicate dance of elements happening inside the body, with one element transforming into another to maintain balance and fulfill those specific biological needs.
This is making me rethink everything I thought I knew about biology.
Yeah, it really suggests a level of complexity and interconnectedness we've barely even scratched the surface of.
For sure. And it's important to remember that George Ohsawa, building on Kervan's research, saw these transmutations as a real-world example of ancient philosophical ideas,
Right.
particularly the concept of yin and yang.
Yeah, the idea that seemingly opposing forces are actually interconnected and can transform into one another.
Which makes a lot of sense when you think about how elements like sodium and potassium, which have really different properties, could be transforming into each other within living organisms.
Exactly. Ohsawa went beyond just observing these transmutations. He actually conducted his own experiments, attempting to replicate and expand on Kervan's work. One of his most notable experiments was when he was trying to transmute carbon into iron.
Carbon into iron. That sounds pretty ambitious.
It was. He used a relatively simple setup with an electric arc and pure carbon electrodes in a chamber filled with oxygen.
Clear.
After subjecting the carbon to the electric arc in the presence of oxygen, he observed the formation of a magnetic substance which he believed to be iron.
So he was trying to replicate these biological transmutations in a controlled environment.
Yeah, precisely. He believed that if we could understand and harness the power of biological transmutation, it could lead to groundbreaking advancements in fields like agriculture and material science.
Yeah, imagine being able to create essential elements without having to rely on traditional mining or those really energy-intensive processes.
Right. It would be revolutionary.
But if Ohsawa and Kervan were onto something this significant, why hasn't it been more widely accepted? Why hasn't their research revolutionized the world yet?
Yeah, it's a great question. And while both researchers presented compelling observations and theories, their work has remained largely outside mainstream science.
Okay.
For a number of reasons.
Okay.
One challenge is the difficulty of replicating their experiments consistently.
Ah, so the lack of reproducibility
Reproducibility, yeah.
is a major hurdle.
It is. And there's also the issue of explaining how these transmutations could actually be happening at the atomic level.
Right.
Conventional physics suggests that the energy levels within living organisms are simply too low to cause nuclear reactions, which is what would be required for elements to change into other elements.
Right. It's hard to imagine our bodies splitting atoms like a nuclear reactor.
Exactly. So if biological transmutation is happening, the mechanisms must be different from what we currently understand about atomic physics.
Okay.
And this is where Kervan's later work becomes particularly interesting.
Oh, what did he propose?
Initially, he suggested a model called frittage,
Frittage.
which is a French word for a type of binding process. Imagine atomic nuclei coming together in a special kind of bond, tighter than a chemical bond, but not as strong as the bonds in a nuclear reaction.
So something in between chemistry and nuclear physics.
Exactly. This frittage concept was Kervan's attempt to explain how these biological transmutations could occur without those huge energy levels typically associated with nuclear transformations.
Okay.
However, he acknowledged that this model had its limitations and later shifted his focus to exploring the potential role of weak interactions in facilitating these transformations.
Weak interactions, I'm not familiar with those.
They are a fundamental force in physics, and they involve particles called neutrinos.
Neutrinos, those are the tiny, almost massless particles that can pass through anything, right?
That's right. They're notoriously difficult to detect, but they play a critical role in nuclear processes.
Huh.
So Kervran, in collaboration with a physicist named Costa de Beauregard, explored the idea that neutrinos could be facilitating the transfer of protons or neutrons within atomic nuclei, ultimately leading to the transmutation of elements.
So they were suggesting that neutrinos, through these weak interactions, could be the key to understanding how biological transmutation works.
Exactly. However, they weren't able to fully develop a theoretical framework that could explain this phenomenon using the known laws of physics. It remained a very compelling yet incomplete idea.
So it's still a mystery.
To a large extent, yes. But that doesn't mean it's been completely abandoned.
Okay.
There's still researchers today who are revisiting these ideas with more advanced tools and techniques.
That's encouraging. It seems like there's still so much we don't know about the potential of biological systems.
Absolutely. There are several new approaches being used to investigate biological transmutation.
I'm curious to hear more about that. What kind of approaches are being taken?
One exciting avenue involves using highly sensitive analytical methods to detect even the smallest traces of elements that might be produced through transmutation. Techniques like mass spectrometry and isotopic analysis can provide a detailed fingerprint of the elements involved, distinguishing between those originally present and those potentially created through transmutation.
So it's a bit like forensic science analyzing the evidence at the atomic level to see if any unexpected elements have shown up.
Exactly. Another approach involves designing experiments that aim to produce extremely rare elements, ones that are highly unlikely to be present as contaminants.
Okay.
If these rare elements are detected in the experiments, it would strengthen the case for transmutation.
It's like setting a trap for transmutation.
Yeah.
Using those rare elements as bait to see if they can be created through biological processes.
Exactly. And there's growing interest in exploring the role of microorganisms in biological transmutation. We know that some bacteria can create sulfur from oxygen, so researchers are wondering if other microbes might be facilitating transmutation processes in plants and animals.
That's a fascinating thought. It makes you wonder what other hidden talents microbes might have shaping the elements around them in ways we haven't even imagined.
Absolutely. The microbial world is full of surprises, and it wouldn't be surprising if they play a crucial role in this phenomenon. But beyond the scientific quest to prove or disprove biological transmutation, there are also some profound philosophical implications to consider.
That's what I find so intriguing about this whole topic.
Yeah.
It's not just about elements changing into other elements. It challenges our fundamental understanding of the universe and our place in it.
Indeed. If biological transmutation were to be definitively proven, it would force us to reconsider our understanding of matter and energy, the very building blocks of our universe. It might even challenge the second law of thermodynamics, which states that entropy or disorder always increases in a closed system.
That's a pretty fundamental law of physics. Are you suggesting that biological systems might be bending the rules somehow?
It's a thought-provoking possibility. Living organisms, after all, are incredibly complex and seem to defy entropy by creating order out of seeming chaos. They grow, evolve, and maintain a high degree of organization, all while existing in a universe that supposedly tends towards disorder.
It's as if life itself is a counterforce to the natural tendency towards entropy.
And perhaps biological transmutation, if it's real, could be a clue to understanding how life manages to pull this off. It could even point to a deeper interconnectedness between matter, energy, and consciousness, something that has been pondered by philosophers and mystics for centuries.
It's almost as if we're glimpsing a hidden dimension of reality, where the rules of physics, as we currently understand them, might not fully apply.
It's a humbling thought, isn't it? And it reminds us that there's still so much we don't know about the universe and the incredible potential of living systems.
This has been an incredible journey of exploration, diving deep into a topic that truly challenges conventional thinking. We've learned of the pioneering research of Kervran and Ohsawa, the ongoing efforts to prove or disprove biological transmutation, and the profound philosophical questions that this concept raises.
And whether or not biological transmutation is ultimately proven true, the very act of exploring these ideas has expanded our understanding of the mysteries of life and the universe.
It's a reminder to stay curious, to keep questioning, and to never stop exploring the boundaries of what we think we know. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of biological transmutation.
It's been a pleasure exploring this with you.